It is the year 1914. After a journey of 67 days, our protagonist, a young Englishman, arrives at a remote island in the South Atlantic to serve as a weather observer for 1 year. Upon landing, the entire crew assists him in transporting his belongings to the cabin where he is to reside. He notices the absence of birds in the area, and the captain tells him that no weather officer is present to welcome them. The captain deems it unsafe, as the surroundings appear abandoned and the cabin looks like it has been deserted for quite some time. Despite the captain's warnings, the Englishman insists on staying. The captain agrees to help him explore the island, even though it's beyond his obligation. They come across a fountain with the words, "Gruner owns this fountain," etched into the stone. They also spot a lighthouse they had seen from afar. After sending the rest of the crew back to the boat, the captain continues with the Englishman on foot. They enter the lighthouse, which is crudely fortified, and find an old man asleep inside. This is Gruner, who mumbles something about returning to the lake before rising from his bed. When questioned about Alder Vigeland, the former weather observer who was supposed to return with them, Gruner claims he died of typhus and simply vanished without a trace. As Gruner offers no further explanation, the two men leave. The captain tries to give the Englishman his pistol before departing, but the Englishman declines. After saying farewell, the Englishman returns to the cabin and begins tidying up and preparing his meteorological equipment. He discovers his predecessor's journal in the desk drawer and decides to flip through it. Alongside standard notes on the island's flora and fauna, the initial pages feature a drawing of a woman in a wedding gown labeled Mrs. Vigeland, with the words "Love, Love, Love" written on the back, suggesting she was the former observer's wife. Soon, things take a bizarre turn. Illustrations and entries depict strange aquatic creatures attacking people, along with the ominous claim that Darwin was wrong. The next day, while walking along the beach, the Englishman notices rings of rocks and shells arranged in patterns too precise to be random. That night, he hears growling and thumping outside the wooden walls of his cabin. As he cautiously approaches the door, a monstrous hand, just like those in the journal sketches, slides underneath. He quickly retreats to the basement and bolts the door, all while hearing more creatures scaling the exterior. Through a knothole in the wood, he spies what's happening upstairs and stabs one of the creatures in the eye with a knife. Still, with the threat outside persisting, he ties the doorknob to the staircase and chooses to remain in the basement overnight. The next morning, he emerges to find blood on the floor and strange footprints in the sand. He rushes to the lighthouse but is unable to open the door. After calling out several times, Gruner finally opens a window and throws water on him. The man refuses to let him in, saying he should have stayed on the boat. The Englishman returns to the cabin and begins reinforcing it for another likely assault. He lines the house with books, applies lamp oil, boards up the windows, and loads a gun found in his crate. He then secures the door. Before long, the creatures arrive and start pounding on the door and windows, gradually breaking through the barricades. Initially, the Englishman manages to shoot a few, but their numbers are overwhelming. To scare them off, he lights a torch and hurls it onto a circle of paper soaked in oil around the cabin. Unfortunately, the flames get out of control. The man is forced to flee as the cabin catches fire, burning his hand in the process. It begins to rain, and he spends the night sheltered behind rocks on the beach. The next morning, he finds the cabin reduced to ashes. He retrieves his weapon, wraps his injured hand in a cloth, and sneaks behind Gruner, who is heading toward the fountain. Suddenly, he is ambushed by a sea creature wearing a sweater, much like the ones shown in the journal. At that moment, Gruner appears and aims his gun at the Englishman, who already has his weapon trained on the creature. As the Englishman stands firm, Gruner is forced to lower his weapon. They strike a truce, and Gruner begins calling him friend. After the Englishman explains that he has ample supplies to share and insists that the creature is harmless, demonstrating this by calling her over like a pet, Gruner reluctantly agrees to let him stay in the lighthouse. Together, they head back to the burnt cabin and start salvaging any usable items. Friend tells Gruner that he suspects the last observer was taken by the creatures after being left alone in the cabin, rather than dying from typhus. Gruner neither confirms nor denies this, simply stating that dusk is approaching and they must go. Later, it is revealed that the creature's saliva has healing properties, as she treats Friend's burned hand. According to Gruner, Friend has been unconscious and sleeping for nearly 2 days. They walk upstairs and discuss the matter while counting the ammunition they have available. Gruner can only command her. He has no real way to communicate with her. He states, no matter how cruel her master is, she'll always return to him, just like a dog. While Gruner elaborates on his theory about solitary marine creatures that evolved independently to survive, Friend watches her in fascination. This line of thought irritates Gruner, so he interrupts and leads Friend to the balcony, explaining that all forms of light, natural or artificial, are despised by the sea creatures. Friend then asks Gruner why he didn't leave with the boat 4 days earlier and return to his previous life. Gruner responds by questioning why Friend abandoned civilization to come to a deserted island in the first place. Here, Gruner claims he controls his destiny and prefers it that way. Friend says he's free to stay if he chooses, but he plans to post a signal for the next passing ship. Gruner adds that the lighthouse isn't on a trade route. It was only built to misappropriate government funds. The next day, Friend begins marking the days on the wall and gradually becomes accustomed to a more amicable relationship with the creature. As night falls, Gruner tells him to retrieve his gun and brings him to the balcony, where the lighthouse beams brightly and torches are lit. Fully armed, Gruner tells Friend that the creatures are approaching and instructs him to shoot only when they get close. Killing a few is enough because they will start devouring each other. Friend notices that their own creature is howling loudly on the upper balcony and wonders aloud if the monsters are attacking in order to save her. When the monsters finally arrive, Gruner launches an immediate assault, but Friend is overwhelmed by fear, retreats inside, and passes out. The following morning, a furious Gruner wakes him and says that no matter how many provisions he brings, he won't tolerate someone who doesn't pull their weight. He orders Friend to make himself useful by fetching water. When Friend returns to the lighthouse, he finds Gruner sharing a bed with the creature. Gruner gives him one final chance to prove himself if he wants to continue staying in the lighthouse. That evening, Gruner leads him out to the balcony again, but this time locks Friend outside, forcing him to defend against the monsters alone. When Gruner reopens the door the next morning, he finds Friend still alive, though covered in blood. The two men then establish a routine. Friend earns his place in the lighthouse by performing daily chores, and together they defend against nightly beast attacks. Friend reflects that he came to the island seeking peace in solitude, but instead found torment. He wonders why the creatures don't attack every night. He doesn't see them at all for 2 weeks. As part of his regular scavenging for firewood, he begins collecting whale bones to carve. The sensation of the creature's cold skin should be disturbing, and Friend struggles to understand how Gruner can assault them so ruthlessly and yet sleep with one. Despite this, Friend grows closer to the creature and even names her Anaris. One night, the two men forget to activate the lights because they're engrossed in a chess game. The monsters attack and nearly overpower them, but they manage to lock themselves inside the lighthouse, though Gruner injures his leg. The next morning, Anaris tends to Gruner's wounds, and Friend notes that their ammunition is running dangerously low. Soon after, a ship appears on the horizon. Friend leaves to retrieve a flare gun, but when he returns, Gruner stops him from firing it, insisting he can take care of himself. It's obvious he doesn't want more people coming to the island. Anaris growls at him to stay away from Friend, but Gruner tries to punish her in response. Days later, Friend hears Gruner yelling and striking Anaris, who then storms out of the lighthouse. Friend cautiously follows and shows her a small boat he has constructed from whale bones. Upon recognizing the shape, Anaris leads him to a hidden part of the island, where an abandoned boat lies on the sand. Later, Friend tells Gruner about it, but Gruner already knows. He says he didn't mention it because it's pointless. If Friend tried to use it, he'd either starve or be killed by the monsters. When asked where the boat came from, Gruner says it once belonged to a Portuguese sailor who survived a shipwreck but was ultimately slain by the creatures. Gruner believes the dynamite being transported on that ship had become waterlogged. However, Friend is convinced he can use the diving gear he found to recover the submerged crates of explosives, which could be used to wipe out the monsters. The next day, while repairing the boat, Friend hears Anaris singing at the fountain. Gruner grows jealous as he watches Friend take off his shirt and join her in the water. In an obvious attempt to eliminate Friend and keep Anaris for himself, Gruner later tosses the diving gear at Friend and tells him that he's changed his mind. They'll explore the dynamite site together. They board the boat and head to the wreck location. After putting on the diving suit, Friend descends beneath the surface to find the crates of dynamite. He attaches them to a hook, which Gruner pulls up onto the boat. While doing this, Friend is knocked down by two young sea creatures swimming nearby. He tugs the rope 3 times, signaling for help as his air runs out, but Gruner deliberately ignores the signal. With no other choice, Friend escapes the diving suit and swims back to the boat. Back at the lighthouse, they open the dynamite crates, only to find all but one are ruined. They bury the usable sticks in 2 separate lines outside the lighthouse, one dangerously close to the structure. As winter arrives, snow begins to fall. For an entire week, there are no creature attacks. One morning, Friend discovers that Gruner spent the night on the balcony, nearly frozen, with his hand on the dynamite detonator. Friend disconnects the wires before bringing Gruner back inside. For 3 weeks, there are no more assaults. Gruner suspects that Anaris warned her kind. One evening, Gruner brings Anaris to the balcony and forces her to perform, while Friend stays by the open door, surrounded by lights. The monsters seize the opportunity to enter the lighthouse and attack. Gruner tries but fails to detonate the explosives. Friend rushes upstairs, firing at the creatures, then connects the wires to the detonator. When everything is set, he pulls the lever, setting off the line of dynamite farthest from the lighthouse and destroying most of the beasts. Gruner, excited, pulls the lever again, ignoring Friend's warnings, and triggers the second, closer line of explosives. The blast knocks them both unconscious. The next morning, they go outside to assess the damage. Friend finds a bone necklace on one of the dead creatures, a sign of sentience, he thinks, but Gruner hurls it into the ocean. They then hear the sorrowful cries of Anaris and the others, mourning their fallen. Gruner reveals that he found Anaris as an infant, crying and tangled in a net. According to him, she always does the same, cries endlessly but eventually comes back. Friend believes she's grieving. The next day, while walking along the shore, Friend sees 2 young sea beings. Trying to show friendliness, he arranges a circle of stones on the beach. When he returns to the lighthouse, he finds Gruner reloading their weapons with fake ammunition to keep scaring the beasts. The following morning, Friend finds Gruner passed out from alcohol. Inside a box, he discovers the same photo of a woman he had seen earlier in Gruner's quarters. On the back, the words love, love, love are written. At that moment, Friend realizes the previous weatherman never died. Gruner is a false identity. The real man has gone mad from isolation and grief. This discovery unsettles Friend, prompting him to erase the tally marks he had been keeping on the wall. Later that day, he finds the stone circle empty. The creatures have taken the small bone boat. Friend sees a young creature and, to show he's harmless, places his torch inside the circle and raises his hands in surrender. The little one approaches him, joined by several others, including Anaris. Just as the child is about to return the bone boat to Friend, Gruner fires a shot, scaring the creatures back into the sea. He commands Anaris to come back to the lighthouse, but she refuses. Realizing she won't obey him, Gruner storms back, muttering angrily, "No one leaves Gruner. Gruner leaves." From the balcony, Gruner shoots and kills the young creature. Enraged, Friend rushes back to the lighthouse and attacks him, but Gruner overpowers him. Friend, using his real name, tells him, "Alder Vigeland is not a killer." Hearing this, and the repeated words, love, 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 Gruner is overcome with emotion. He opens the door and walks outside, surrendering himself to the creatures. Hearing the sounds outside, Friend understands that Gruner is gone and he is now alone. He shuts the door behind him. Weeks pass. Friend sleeps in Gruner's old bed inside the lighthouse. When a new crew arrives, they mistake Friend for Gruner and assume he is the new weather observer. He doesn't correct them. Instead, he claims the previous weatherman died of typhus. When he steps out onto the balcony, he sees several ships in the distance. The officer scolds him for the state of the room and informs him that the world is at war. As the film ends, Anaris is seen running along the shore before leaping back into the sea. The Lighthouse is a haunting and emotionally layered film that explores the psychological toll of isolation, the fragile boundary between civilization and savagery, and the deep need for connection, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. While on the surface it may appear to be a survival horror narrative, at its core, the film delves into profound philosophical and emotional themes, using the remote setting and otherworldly creatures as metaphors for the inner workings of the human psyche. The central dynamic between Friend and Gruner represents a clash of worldviews, one driven by fear, domination, and control, and the other slowly transforming through empathy, understanding, and growth. Gruner, consumed by years of loneliness and bitterness, dehumanizes the sea creatures and ultimately himself. His descent into madness is tragic, and it becomes clear that he is no longer capable of seeing the creatures, or even other humans, as anything other than threats or possessions. The lies he told, including assuming a false identity and fabricating the fate of the previous weatherman, emphasize how much he has disconnected from reality and morality. Friend, by contrast, starts off as an outsider seeking peace in isolation but is quickly pulled into a moral and existential struggle. His transformation is gradual and painful, marked by moments of terror, wonder, and eventually compassion. His relationship with Anaris, initially driven by curiosity and fear, becomes a symbol of his awakening. He begins to see the creatures not as monsters, but as sentient beings with emotions, memories, and a capacity for loss. His decision to spare them, to communicate instead of attack, and his eventual refusal to perpetuate Gruner's legacy of violence show a deep personal evolution. The creatures themselves are portrayed not merely as threats, but as a misunderstood species whose pain, grief, and intelligence challenge the protagonist's assumptions. The scene where Friend finds the bone necklace, or the one where Anaris mourns the fallen, humanizes them and raises questions about what truly defines monstrosity. Is it physical form, or is it the inability to feel empathy? The ending is both hopeful and unsettling. Friend, having assumed the role of Gruner to outsiders, is left in a morally ambiguous position. Though he has survived, he must carry the weight of the choices made on the island. His final lie about the fate of the previous weatherman suggests a complex blend of guilt, self-preservation, and resignation. The appearance of Anaris at the end, disappearing once more into the sea, is symbolic. It reflects the transient nature of trust, the impossibility of returning to innocence, and the ever-present tension between man and the unknown. Ultimately, the lighthouse serves as an allegory about the human condition, our struggle to reconcile fear with compassion, solitude with the need for belonging, and survival with morality. It challenges viewers to reflect on the consequences of isolation, the nature of empathy, and the cost of dehumanizing the other. In its atmospheric, slow-burning narrative, the film leaves a lingering impression that sometimes the real monsters are not the ones lurking in the dark, but the ones we've allowed ourselves to become.